Welcome everybody along to the council meeting. I'd also like to welcome our viewers at home who are watching the meeting via the live stream. If I could ask everyone please now to stand. Deputy Mayor Bianca Sandri, could you please read out the opening prayer?
Almighty God, we ask you to guide us in all our discussions to show goodness, honesty, understanding and wisdom in all that we undertake to do. May we respect each other's views at all times, and we ask all of this in your name.
Councillor Caddy, could you please read out the acknowledgement of country?
On behalf of councillors, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, on which this meeting is taking place, and show our respect for elders past, present and emerging.
Thank you, and you can all take your seats, thanks. Please note that without prior approval, any recordings of this meeting is prohibited. Members of the public should note that no action should be taken on any resolution of council prior to written advice from the city being received. Now brings to item 1, which is the official opening. Ladies and gentlemen, I declare the council meeting of the 13th of October 2020 open at 7:01 p.m. Item 2, attendance and apologies. I have nil. Item 3, approved leave of absence. I have a future leave for Councillor Caron Caddy, granted a leave of absence for the period 19 of October 2020 to 29th of October 2020. Disclosures of interest. The following disclosures of interest have been received. Councillor Caron Caddy disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.2 PRS1 as members of the Surfing WA board are known to her. Councillor Felicity Farrelly disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.2 PRS1 as she knows some of the members from both Surfing WA Committee and the Friends of Trig Beach. Mayor Mark Irwin, myself, disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.2 PRS1 as he has met with Surfing WA. Councillor David Lagan disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.2 PRS3 as he has met the neighbours to the right of way during door knocking. Councillor Bianca Sandri disclosed a proximity financial interest in item 12.2 PRS3 as she owns a property at the west end of the right of way and received a consultation letter. However, she made no community comment. Councillor Chris Hatton disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.2 PRS5 as he is a board member of the Balcatta Senior High School. Councillor Joe Ferranti disclosed a financial interest in item 12.2 PRS6 as he is a shareholder. Councillor Chris Hatton disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.2 PRS6 as the developer is a family member. Councillor Carlo Perkov disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.2 PRS6 as he knows the owner of the land. Councillor Bianca Sandri disclosed a financial interest in item 12.2 PRS6 as one of the owners of the land is known to her business. And the CEO, Stuart Jardine, disclosed a financial interest in item 12.2 10.1 as the item relates to the CEO's contract of employment. Councillors, are there any other disclosure of interest? Councillor Spagnolo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Apologies for the late entry. Mr Mayor, I have an impartial interest in item 12.2 PR6 as the developer is also known to me.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Make sure the paperwork's done. Any other councillors? No? And with your indulgence, I will just mention that under item 2, apologies, I do actually have an apology from Councillor Hatton who sent that in prior to the meeting. That was my mistake, if we can record that. Item 5, petitions. 2 E-petitions have been received by the City. Councillor Caddy, would you like to read out the first verified E-petition?
Yeah, thank you. This is a E-petition titled Support for the Caron Up High-Rise Residential Development. It has a total number of verified signatures of 16. We, the undersigned, support the approval process in relation to the Caron Up Shopping Centre high-rise residential development. We are not opposed to the development but expect that Council will review the development against appropriate impacts to the local community. We expect that appropriate infrastructure will be provided to support this development and look forward to the increased amenities it will bring to our community.
Thank you. Councillor Farrelly, would you like to read out the second verified E-petition, please?
Yes, I have an E-petition. Refuse Surfing WA ground lease. Total number of verified signatures is 472. We, the undersigned, do respectfully request that the Council do not enter into a ground lease agreement with Surfing WA for the land situated at South Trig as referenced in planning documents pertaining to Surfing WA proposed headquarters, Trig Beach. We believe the area should remain a grass picnic area. Currently, the only amenity of its type along the coastal path between Scarborough and Mettams Pill that affords unencumbered sea views. We believe the area should continue to be an open space utilised by the entire community rather than reserved for the exclusive use of one organisation for the purpose of constructing their head office building. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other petitions, councillors? If not, can I have a mover and a seconder to receive the petitions, please? Move Councillor Rees, seconded Councillor Migdal. If you could go to your vote on that, please, councillors. Thank you. That is unanimous. Item 6, responses to previous questions from members of the public taken on notice. And those questions from the previous council meeting were published in the minutes of that meeting. Brings us to item 7, public question time. We will now move on to public question time. Councillors, there are 18 members of the public who have registered to ask a question this evening. To enable all questions to be asked and responded to without the need for multiple extensions of time during that, could I please request a mover and a seconder for the following motion? That in accordance with clause 5712 of the City of Stirling's meeting procedures, local law 2009, public question time be extended for the time needed to respond to these questions from members of the public who have registered. Move Councillor Rees, seconded Councillor Perkoff. If we can go to the vote on that, please, councillors. And that is unanimous. Thank you. And the first person to ask a question, if I could ask Michelle Wilson to come forward, please. No Michelle Wilson? We have 17 people this evening. Anne Vivers? We have 16 people. Adam Green? This prior registering is working quite well, isn't it? Andre Dines? And we have a winner. There we go. And just if you can just turn your microphone on, and just your name and suburb, please, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Andre Dines from Burrows Road, Caron. Good evening, Mayor, councillors and staff. My 3 questions are in relation to the Caron Shopping Centre redevelopment. Question 1. Contrary to State Planning Policy 4.2 Activity Centre plans for Perth and Peel, in which Caron Shopping Centre is classified as a secondary centre, however, an activity centre plan was never endorsed before the original development was approved in 2015. It is understood that AMP Capital submitted an activity centre plan, but it was not progressed by the City. This plan extended beyond the boundary of the Caron Shopping Centre to include all of the properties immediately surrounding. This would have allowed those residential properties and ratepayers most impacted by the Caron Shopping Centre expansion a choice to trade out of their properties whilst also providing infill opportunities and facilitating transitional built form outcomes, similar to what is being achieved around the Burragoon Shopping Centre, aka Caron at the south, which has an activity centre plan which clearly sets out the R-codes and building heights for the area. Local Planning Policy 5.7 Caron Regional Centre Guidelines, which were last updated in May 2018, states, "It is the ultimate intention to extend a mixed-use zone to all lots around the Caron Regional Centre after thorough community consultation and urban design studies have been completed." During question time on the 8th of September 2020, the Director of Planning and Development advised that the City has no current intention of rezoning properties along Burrows Road and Davenport in response to the redevelopment of the Caron Shopping Centre. Can the City please confirm why it is not considering rezoning the adjoining properties as per the outcomes that would have been achieved via an activity centre plan and in accordance with the intent of the Local Planning Policy 5.7?
Thank you. Mr Roddick.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Mr Dines, for your question. As stated in the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting on the 22nd December 2020, there's a report to Council on the 3rd of February. The City recommended that a development zone be created for the Caron Shopping Centre site and surrounding area to enable the City to advertise and adopt the draft activity centre structure plan. This recommendation was ultimately lost at a vote of the full Council and no further action was undertaken. Following the aforementioned Council resolution, the draft activity centre structure plan and any potential rezoning of properties surrounding the Caron Shopping Centre site has not progressed. Local Planning Policy 5.7, Caron Regional Centre Guidelines signals that it is the ultimate intention to extend a mixed-use zone to all lots around the Caron Regional Centre after thorough community consultation and urban design studies have been completed. This is a long-term strategic aim to signal to the community and prospective property buyers that the area is an area of potential change. Notwithstanding this, the City reiterates there are no current plans to initiate any rezoning of the properties surrounding the Caron Shopping Centre site.
Mr Dines?
Thank you. Question 2. Local Planning Policy 5.7 Caron Regional Centre Guidelines, which were last updated May 2018, states to create main street frontages to the existing roads surrounding Caron Shopping Centre. During public question time on the 25th of August 2020, the Director of Planning and Development advised in relation to the application of the local planning policy that, therefore, on-street parking was required to be provided on all streets surrounding the shopping centre. Can the City please confirm how many on-street parking bays have or will be created on the streets surrounding the centre on a street-by-street basis, please?
Mr Roddick?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Dines. As part of the original approval for the Form 1 DAP application for the expansion of the shopping centre, conditions were imposed by the Metro North West JDAP requiring significant road upgrades to Francis Avenue, Burrows Road and Davenport Street. The conditions required detailed designs to be submitted that incorporated a number of items, including but not limited to lane widths, parking bays, cycle paths, footpaths, landscaping and pedestrian crossings. These roads are still under construction. However, at present, there are 24 on-street car parking bays that have been constructed along Davenport Street. Additional on-street car parking bays will be provided along Davenport Street upon the completion of the approved 7-storey mixed-use development located on the northeast corner of the site. On-street car parking bays will also be constructed along Burrows Road, but not on Francis Avenue due to the limited road width. The number of bays will be determined upon lodgement and assessment of detailed engineering drawings provided to the City. The on-street car parking bays have been provided at the expense of the landowner and are not subject to a cash in lieu payment. Cash in lieu of parking payments relate to developments which result in a shortfall of parking bays on site. This development was approved with a cap of car parking at 4,880 bays. At this stage, the City does not intend on using the on-street car parking bays as paid parking. However, this may be subject to future review at Council should this be initiated.
Mr Dines?
Thank you. Question 3. The transport plan prepared by Oricon as part of the development application for the mixed-use expansion of the Caron Shopping Centre states that Strategy 5, introduce paid parking for staff. This includes introduce paid parking for all staff to assist in managing travel demand and behaviour at the centre, and future-proof the car park design to allow for paid customer parking to be introduced. Whilst the intent may be to encourage staff and customers to catch public transport, it will more than likely lead to staff and customers seeking free parking in the surrounding streets, verges, parks and vacant blocks, as is currently the case with the construction workers. This was also an issue when the staff were prevented from parking on site by the Caron Shopping Centre before the Council responded to the residents' complaints. Can the City please confirm what strategies the City has prepared for when this paid parking is introduced by Caron Shopping Centre, and will this include introducing paid parking within the streets?
Mr Roddick?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Condition 44, the original approval for the Form 1 application, required a maximum of 4,880 car parking bays to be provided and reserved as public parking bays to the satisfaction of the City. The endorsed travel behaviour change and parking management plan identifies a total of 1,000 car parking bays to be allocated as staff parking bays, with the remaining 3,880 car parking bays allocated for visitors and residents. The parking management plan states that the allocation of these bays may be subject to change based on the varying transport needs of users to the centre, with any change being subject to review and endorsement by the City. The endorsed transport plan was modelled based on the surrounding road network, strategies to increase sustainable transport, including public transport, pedestrian and cycle access, and parking management. The car parking facilities considered in the endorsed transport plan relate only to the car parking facilities provided on site and within the verge. Informal on-street bays within the surrounding road network were not included within the modelling of the endorsed transport plan to support the development. The endorsed travel behaviour change and parking management plan identifies that parking restrictions will be placed on staff and visitors by way of time limits and/or parking permits. Should this result in informal on-street parking within the surrounding local road network, the City will investigate this and implement measures, including but not limited to enforcement of the installation of timed on-street parking bays. This will only be considered once the shopping centre is fully developed.
Thank you for your questions, Mr Dines.
Thank you.
Lynn Noak, please. Okay, just your name and suburb to start.
Lynn Noack, Burrows Road, Caron. Good evening, councillors, neighbours. The original Caron Shopping Centre expansion approval in August of 2015 contained two key development conditions, number 35 and number 36. They related to the timing of the commencement of the residential component of the development. During public question time on the 25th of August of this year, the Director of Planning and Development advised that the applicant's justification letter received on the 4th of May formed part of the City's consideration of the Form 2 application proposing to delete those conditions 35 and 36. AMP themselves stated that AMP has a strong desire for the inclusion of a substantial residential component as part of the overall development of the centre. Of course they do. They need it. However, now we, the residents, are faced with a very real concern. That we, residents, will be living in an ad hoc construction zone for potentially 10 to 20 years, which will be further compounded by the likely redevelopment or the possible redevelopment of North Court and the library. Can the City please confirm, A, prior to the supporting of the removal of the development conditions 35 and 36 in its responsible authority report, if the City of Stirling sought and or obtained a legally enforceable agreement relating to the timing of the residential development component of the centre's expansion?
Mr Roddick.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Ms Noak, for the question. The short answer is the City did not seek nor obtain a legal agreement in relation to the deletion of those conditions. Conditions 35 and 36 were imposed as part of the original development approval, as the application was lodged in the absence of an activity centre plan. The conditions were imposed to ensure that a substantial residential component would be provided during the initial stages of the construction and prior to the occupation of the completed shopping centre redevelopment, in line with the intent of State Planning Policy 4.2. The removal of conditions 35 and 36 was considered as part of the Form 2 DAP application lodged in January 2020, which also included an additional rooftop car park, modifications to the external and internal facades, and the deletion of a number of conditions primarily relating to the residential component of the development. In assessing the merits of the request to remove conditions 35 and 36, the City was satisfied that the landowner had undertaken significant progress towards providing a residential component of the development and was comfortable that residential development would be constructed in the future. A legal agreement is not required to support the removal of conditions 35 and 36. To be clear, the City did not support the removal of the residential component from the development. The City did, however, support the removal of the restrictive timing of delivery of the residential component of the development.
Thank you. Your second question.
B, if the centre is sold to a third party prior to the completion of part or whole of the residential component, will the new owner be required to complete the residential component? If so, how? And a suggestion as to by when?
Mr Roddick.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. The development approvals issued would need to be complied with by the landowner. However, should the site be sold to a third party, they may submit a development application seeking to remove components from the overall development, which would be assessed on its merits at that time. Ms Noak, the key with this development is that the original approval showed residential development, and therefore, I guess, on completion on later stages of the commercial, component, residential development must be provided. If it's not, the applicant may be in breach of planning conditions.
Ms Noak.
C of question 1.
Oh,
The response also carried a reference to Blackburn regarding pre-sales, etc. And it did say in that response, no guarantees were given it's a strange year in 2020, but stated that any delays would then transfer to the western residential component, that is the borough's roadside, with little or no thought for the ongoing impact to the residents on the borough's roadside. Is the City of Stirling content with that decision, which obviously produces encumbrances for those residences?
Mr. Roddick.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. The City is comfortable, Ms Knox, with the removal of those two conditions. The City is confident that residential development will be provided on the site, and in my opinion that's likely to be provided on the east side of the site in the near future.
So I don't have to feel like I'm under the sword of Damocles?
Thank you for your questions this evening, Ms Nowak. And I do understand you wish to ask more questions by the sound of it, but unfortunately there is 3 questions this evening and we do have a few to go through. I know some other people are seeking a meeting with Mr Roddick and I'm sure he's happy to have another meeting with you. And the questions you have, we're happy to publish in the actual minutes of this meeting.
Okay, could I make one other request? Could the person taking the minutes actually spell my name correctly?
Yes?
Thank
yes,
you.
we'll make sure we've got it. Is it N-O-A-C-K?
That's correct.
Yes, we'll make sure that's right. Thank you. Alan Morse. I hope I did better with the pronunciation this time.
Yep, spot on. Thank you, Mayor.
And your name and suburb, please.
Alan Morse, Caron. My question relates to conflicting advice regarding the Caron BP petrol station. At a recent meeting with the developers of the Caron Shopping Centre, that is AMP and Rowe Group, the developers stated that no new approval was required to move the petrol station because they already had such approval and have had it for some time. A 24-storey residential tower is currently proposed for that site. This seems to contradict the answer given by the City to my previous question on this matter, item 7.3, question 3, minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting on the 5th of September 2020, which indicated that no formal application for this had yet been submitted. Residents of Francis Avenue, Caronup remain very concerned that an ugly and inherently hazardous petrol station might be built on the iconic corner of Francis Avenue and Caronup Road, adjacent to a childcare centre and a medical centre. This very busy intersection represents the welcome to Caronup, but is now regularly becoming dangerously clogged by traffic trying to turn into KFC and Hungry Jack's and the entrance to the new multi-storey car park, which is way too close to the traffic lights at that major intersection. Addition of a petrol station on that corner would further exacerbate these traffic problems. To address the assertion by the developers that they do not need further approval, can the City please clarify whether any approvals for the move of the BP petrol station are already in place, or whether they will still be required in the future and hence be subject to the relevant planning framework? Exactly what is the situation with that petrol station? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Roddick?
Thank you, Mr Mouse, for your question. The original approval for the expansion of the shopping centre did include a service station on the corner of Caronup Road and Francis Avenue. To date, no works have been undertaken towards the construction of this service station. We have had meetings with the proponent about a new service station at that location, and if that proposal is put forward, it would require development application as its location and is different to the original proposal. And of course, as part of that consideration, we will look at advertising the proposal and take into consideration any comments regarding traffic, but also look at the traffic implications on that corner. So yes, a new development application would be required if they were building a different type of service station that was originally proposed.
And we can provide you more detail on that, Mr Morse, and a response in writing.
Yeah, sorry, I still find that a little confusing. If it's the same type of petrol station, do they not need any approval?
So that's why, Mr Morse, I think with that one, if we provide you more detail in writing and make sure that it's in the minutes of the meeting so that you have the details of that and what's currently there. Samara Kemp, please. Thank you. Just your name and your suburb.
Samara Kemp, Caron. The members of the Caron Residents for Responsible Development Group, which members are here tonight and I am one of, would like to ask the City as to why it chose to afford the residents of Trigg written notice of the proposed new Surfing WA development who are residing within an 800-metre radius of the proposed site, when they chose to only notify residents of Caron living 210 metres of the Caron West residential development. Why are we different?
Thank you. Mr. Roddy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Mr. Kemp, for your question. The proposed Surfing WA headquarters did not require formal consultation in accordance with the City's planning consultation procedure. The City advises the public consultation was undertaken in relation to the ground lease and design and not as a result of a development application. In relation to the 800-metre advertising radius, the City advises that the radius was increased from the standard 200 metres catchment due to the isolated location of the proposal, being mostly surrounded by bushland, car parking and the ocean. There are no residential properties within a 200-metre radius, and therefore the radius was increased to 800 metres to ensure owners and occupiers closest to the proposed development were made aware of the proposed ground lease and design.
Ms. Kemp?
Okay. Am I able to read out another question?
Yes, you may ask another question.
Okay. Over the past few council meetings, there have been several queries relating to potential redevelopment of the North Court building and the sale and/or redevelopment of the City of Stirling-owned Caron Library. The City have advised that the library was originally bequeathed and all encumbrances have been removed in recent years, notably in 2015. During public question time on the 25th of August 2020, the Director of Planning and Development advised us that the City is not aware of any current proposals for either sites. Upon a request for clarification from the questioner that there had been no negotiations or discussions regarding these sites, the Mayor confirmed they had not. In a meeting on October the 8th, 2020, between AMP Capital representatives, road group reps and local current member for Caron and ourselves, members of the KRD, we were advised that there were in fact discussions between AMP and the City for AMP to acquire the library site. And at the meeting, AMP stated that there had been discussions in 2015 regarding the purchase of the library, but it came to nothing. Can the City please provide an overview of these discussions, including dates, prices, likely development outcomes, including proposed building heights?
Yeah, sure, I can do that now. I can tell you categorically there's been nothing on the table with any of those. The City's been very clear with this from the start. There is no offer on the table for the library, but we've always maintained that that site, if it was potentially possible and it fitted in with our library strategy and there was a good outcome for the community, we'd be open to discussions, and that's it. There is nothing on the table now or in the near future.
Okay. It's not the case that we've been told.
I'm telling you that is the case. Judy Lundy. Your name and suburb, please.
Judy Lundy, Caron Up. Also asking questions in relation to the Caron Up Western Residential Development DA 19-1906 and also representing the Caron Up Residents for Responsible Development. I had three questions. I'm only going to ask two because one of my questions has been asked. I have been advised by the Department of Main Roads by email on two occasions, 7 and 12 October, that they cannot support DA 19-1906 proposal at this point in time based on the information provided. Given this information, I'm surprised by the fact that representatives of AMP Capital and Rowe Group, Scott Nugent, Greg Rowe and Sean Fairfowl, indicated to concerned Caron Up residents at a meeting held at the offices of Tony Kriskovic, member for Caron, on 8th of October, that they were not aware of any concerns regarding road and traffic issues and that they believed DMR were happy with the development application. Can the Mayor please provide any insights as to why the developer would have a completely different understanding of the situation regarding road and traffic concerns and what the City's position is on this?
Sure. Mr Roddick, can you provide some clarification on any of that, possibly?
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Ms Lundy, for providing your question. The City's request for further information dated 11th of September 2020 identified a number of outstanding items from the City's assessment of the proposed development, comments from the City's internal business units as well as state agencies, including main roads. In response to the City's request for further information, the applicant requested an extension of time to the City's responsible authority report to submit amended plans and information addressing these outstanding items and to allow for the City's subsequent assessment of this additional information. The City is aware that the applicant has met with Main Roads WA to discuss the outstanding items. However, the City has not received any further correspondence from Main Roads regarding the proposed development. At this stage, the proposed development is still under assessment, and as part of any submission of new information, we will be referring any proposal back to Main Roads for their formal comment.
Thank you. Question 2. I'd like to commend the City on the Strategic Community Plan 2018 to 2028, reviewed in 2020, and the widespread sharing of this important document which articulates how the community's vision and objectives will be achieved as required by the Integrated Planning Framework. Can the Mayor please explain, A, how this current development, the Caron Up West residential development, is consistent with the sustainability principles as outlined in the Strategic Community Plan, and B, how the City will be able to achieve Objective B 1.1, plan to create unique and livable neighbourhoods and places that meet community needs, and in particular the performance measure, satisfaction with services and facilities in local neighbourhoods, given the widespread opposition to the current developments by residents of Caron Up?
Thank you for that question, and off the top of my head I probably couldn't provide you with that response. I'm happy to give you more detail in writing on it, but I think, and this has been answered before, the City is not the decision maker, but we are performing an assessment and the RAR will come to Council and it'll be in the public realm, and Council will get an opportunity to discuss those issues.
Thank you.
Warren Myers. Thank you. Just your name and suburb, please.
Yeah, Warren Myers, Caron Up. Is Council making any capital contribution to the Surfing WA amenity?
No, I don't believe we are. Mr Littleton?
Thank you, Worship. Look, I can confirm, no, the City's not providing funding towards the construction of the facility, nor towards any repair, maintenance or replacement costs throughout the life of the ground lease. Surfing WA have secured grant funding from the Federal Government to develop the new headquarters.
Mr Myers?
Thank you. Question 2, which possibly part of that answer. Is the proposed lease term of 21 years for the ground lease for the Surfing WA headquarters premised on the fact they are responsible for capital, maintenance, refurbishment and potentially removal of the asset?
Yes, I would say the short answer is. Mr Littleton?
The short answer is yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't often get them right, but I'll take it. Thank you, Mr Myers. John Paparo, please. Roland Hadley. Thank you. Your name and suburb, please.
Roland Hadley, Woodlands. First question. I read online that there has been numerous payments in August for temporary labour, an approximate figure of 329,000. Excuse me. As the City already spends 74 million on salaries, can the ratepayers expect to pay some 4 million annually for temporary labour?
Sure. Ms Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Hadley. Generally what happens to Mr Hadley is the temporary labour will come in for a short period to cover possible vacancy roles, so that wouldn't be a cost on top of the salary budget. It would be that it would be funded from underspends on the salary.
Thank you.
Mr Hadley?
The second part of that question, can the Finance Department provide costs for this item for the previous 3 financial years?
Thank you, Mr Hadley, and we'll provide you that response in writing.
Thank you. Question 2. On the 19th of August $27,500 was paid to the Stirling Business Centre for venue hire. Again, the briefest information is only supplied. Surely the city is now in a position to provide fuller details that would assist councillors who hopefully peruse these chart of accounts. And through the chair, Mr. Mayor, would the CEO agree that further information could be provided?
Ms Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Hadley. It would be useful for us to probably meet to talk further around this issue. But what can happen is that the payments to a vendor such as the Stirling Business Centre could be for multiple invoices. To be as efficient as we possibly can in our processing and reduce costs, we could pay multiple invoices. So therefore, there is no sort of one line that would identify, because those invoices could be for different types of services. But certainly happy to be useful to come and have a chat so I can provide you some more information.
Yep. Thank you.
And Mr CEO, would you like to make a comment?
Yes, through the chair. Mr Hadley's asked over several months now, could we have further information in terms of invoices and payments? And we've got to balance that up because there's a very significant number. And we've also looked at what other local governments do in terms of transparency and openness, but we're quite happy to answer questions on any individual items you've got, and we provide, in my view, sufficient information to councillors to make informed decisions.
Mr Hadley?
Thank you. Question 3, and again on the 4th of August, $15,603 was paid to the Development Assessment Panel. Why does the city pay the DAP?
Ms Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Hadley, I need to take that one on notice so I can check what the payment was for. I'll provide that in writing to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Hadley. Bob Mitchell. Mr Mitchell? Yep. Thank you. Just your name and suburb, thanks.
Yes, Robert Mitchell, Caron up. Good evening, Mayor, councillors, council officers, members of the public. I have 3 questions tonight. The first one, it's a bit strange. I've noted that the Caron Up West residential towers at DA 1990-06, question 1. I noted a view published in the media by a 14-year-old student of St Mary's Girls' School in Elliott Road, Trigg. This student expressed concern that the outlook from the proposed large tower unit balconies proposed on the corner of Burrows and Caron Up Road will have uninterrupted views down across Trigg bushland to the rear of St Mary's School. This is a major concern that sophisticated equipment could be used for any of these balconies to watch and interfere with the privacy at this school. I raise this matter to alert those who desire this high rise in a residential zone area. Such matter also be noted, considered and adjudicated on by this council and the JDAP.
Thank you for that question, Mr Mitchell. And that the city's responsible.
Sorry?
I said thank you for that question, Mr Mitchell.
Is that clear? There will be some type of acknowledgement.
Yes, so...
And this will be carried through to the JDAP.
Yeah, so...
Thank you.
Yep.
Now, my second question. Recently, in the company of Mr Roddick, we were escorted on the site by the representative of the liaison firm Proven in relation to matters pertaining to Lot 2, 13 Davenport Street, Caron Up Shopping Centre. This property has the Caron Up Library and Cultural building within its boundary. As it is the property of the City of Stirling, the title boundary is not delineated by any type of survey markings. From a legal point, I believe some type of permanent identification, such as survey markers, should be installed permanently to delineate the title property. These can be brass-type discs embedded in concrete with identification. It is obvious that the original site of the R&I Bank, Bank West, is now amalgamated with the Caron Shopping Centre footprint. These markers should be essential identification reference over the coming years.
Thank you,
So
John. I'll get
I'd
some
like
comment.
you to consider.
Thank you. Do you want me to get Mr Roddick to comment?
Saying that. Now, my third question, well, third question or statement. It relates to, I note from a question asked by Mr Arnold Davies, question 2, additional information on the 22nd of September 2020. The question relates to the removal of temporary fencing along Francis Avenue and Davenport Street. Currently, the fence along Francis Avenue engulfs the verge, footpath, to the edge of the road. It is mentioned in this additional information this fencing may remain whilst the units on the corner of Francis Avenue and Davenport are built. This would not allow the footpath use to be re-established after the units are built. Considering the poor liaison with the residents of Francis Avenue to allow that verge to be closed during shopping centre construction, to now placate to the wants of a unit developer against the use of pedestrians is both unreasonable and unwarranted. Please ensure that the boundary fencing for the unit site development is contained within the property site and the footpath completed and available for immediate public use. Developers and builders can and have to work within their lawful building envelope. There is too much fawning to the wants of builders and developers in ad hoc manner by the City of Stirling administration. The wants and amenities of the residents and ratepayers must be foremost. Okay?
Thank you for those comments, Mr Mitchell, and we'll take them on board and provide your response and take it on with the developer.
Good, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Chris Twomey, please. Just your name and suburb, please.
Chris Toomey, Caron Up. My question relates to the Surfing WA ground lease. I should declare I'm a member of the Surfing WA board. My first question is, has Surfing WA been a responsible lessee over its 25 years at Triggs Beach, and does it actively contribute to community participation and safe usage of the beach?
Short answer is yes. Mr Littleton, would you like to provide any?
I can say yes in 5 more words if that helps. Surfing WA have been a model tenant throughout that 25-year period.
Mr Toomey?
Excellent, thank you for that. Are you aware of any other facility on our coastline that enables local community groups like Perth Surfing Mums to care safely for young children while they are surfing?
Mr Littleton?
Thank you, Worship. Look, the proposed facility is designed to accommodate surf classes, education, training, and the administrative functions of Surfing WA. I'm not familiar with any other such facility in Western Australia.
Great. Thank you. My final question, is there any reason why the council would not be confident that Surfing WA will be an asset to our community by providing safe and healthy activities at Triggs Beach, particularly for young people?
And that one, Mr Toomey, is an item for discussion this evening, and I'm sure you will find out in a little while.
Excellent. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr Toomey. Jeff Newman. Just your name and suburb, please.
My name is Jeff Newman. I come from Gwelup. Mr Mayor and councillors, thank you very much indeed for allowing me to come here this evening. Good evening. On Tuesday the 22nd of September, I asked what the council is doing to eradicate in its entirety the toxic weed Morning Glory. This question was prompted by the reliable publication Urban Bushland Council of WA. It said, and I quote, "Morning Glory is suspected to be toxic to livestock and to humans," unquote. The reply by the Manager Parks and Sustainability advised, and I quote, that the city is keenly aware of the impact of Morning Glory, unquote. Then directed me to the draft management plan, which will be released, I believe, in November, notwithstanding that this report is over 2 years old. The report states, and I quote, that the retention of invasive species may present a problem with the potential to recruit into adjunctant native vegetation, unquote. Could you please tell me why the Council has decided on a plan of containment rather than complete eradication?
Thank you. Ms Littleton?
Thank you, Worship. Look, I think the strategy around the management of the Caron wetland is contained in our management plan. The view around Morning Glory is that, look, obviously we're aware that the area is inundated with many different weed species. Our focus is on a strategic management and control of the weed species that are within that wetland. The Morning Glory area is contained, is largely isolated just to the area of the Secret Garden, and the management plan identifies far more invasive weed species that are proposed to be a focus. All of those things are contained within the management plan. I appreciate that it has been widely consulted. It has been in the offing for 2 years, largely because it has undertaken a substantial amount of public consultation, and the matter will be brought to Council in the very near future for resolution.
Mr Newman?
The containment policy of the Council is obviously not working, because I have proof that the toxic weed Morning Glory is not being contained. In fact, it is appearing in the southern area of the Caron wetlands. What is the Council doing to address the spread of this noxious weed?
Mr Littleton?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Look, essentially the strategy for containing all of the weed species are identified in the management plan. The idea of the management plan is to clearly articulate the city's focus and endeavours to manage that entire reserve.
I repeat, what is the Council doing to address the spread of this noxious weed?
And it is contained within the management plan, Mr Newman.
I read that. I still haven't found an answer.
Okay.
I'd like to request that these answers be sent to me via
We'll
hard
respond
copy.
to you in writing, Mr Newman.
Thank you. On the Council meeting on the 22nd of September, Councillor Hatton, supported by Councillor Perkoff, successfully presented a motion to close down the Secret Garden during the recent school holidays. This closure was prompted by the chaotic car park situation that has developed because some people have decided that a portion of the toxic weed-infected Caron wetlands should be called the Secret Garden. I can't understand why. Over the years, this led to herds of unruly visitors abusing the wetlands and, more importantly, abusing the nearby residents. I'm led to believe that the Council received very few calls and letters of complaint about the closure. Bearing that in mind, can the Council please tell me why the so-called tourist attraction should take precedent over the well-being and comfort of the local residents?
Thank you for that question, Mr Newman. And as you're aware, the motion was to close it and then to reopen it. The Caron draft management plan will come back to Council shortly, and Council will consider that and take into consideration all of those things you just said as well.
Thank you.
Sarah Fordham, please. We've just got a couple to go. Thank you. Just your name and your suburb, please.
Sarah Fordham, Caron Up. Thank you, Mr Mayor and Councillors. What is the current R code of the site proposed for the 9, 15 and 24-storey residential high-rise towers at Caron Up Shopping Centre?
Mr Roddy?
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Mr Fordham, for your question. The site's zoned regional centre, so it doesn't have an R code zoning. The scheme does state under clause 5.3.2 that residential development where there is not a residential R code shall comply with the R80 requirements.
Thank you. So if there is no R code, what is the default planning framework specifically relating to the permissible density and height at the site?
Mr Roddy?
Thanks, Ms. Fawn, for the question. I guess there's three key, planning policies would apply to the site, which would be State Planning Policy 4.2, the Residential Design Codes Volume 2 for apartments, and the the Caron Regional Centre Design Guidelines will be the key documents we'll consider as part of the assessment.
Thank you.
Thank you. We can provide you more information on that in writing if you would like.
Thank you, I'd
Thanks.
like that.
Simon Wheeler. Mr. Wheeler.
Good evening, everybody. Simon Wheeler, Scarborough. I've written here for item, and I don't know what it is, but it's about the surfing club anyway, PRS. What is it? For that item, the officer's report fails to note the Bush Forever status of the land. I recall the previous director used to struggle with Bush Forever fine print as well, and I wonder if the planning department maybe uses green ink over the maps when it's looking at putting down Bush Forever. My concern, however, is with the dismissal in the officer's report of an allegedly Facebook advertised e-petition. An e-petitions, by definition, might fairly be imagined to contain some bias, yet surely no more or less than Surfing WA's own Bush Free Forever advertising, which was driving traffic to the Orsay websites. My question is, Mayor, how did the city determine that the e-petition had been advertised on Facebook? Is it usual to investigate such matters, or was this report detail preempted by a third party?
I don't think so. Mr. Littleton.
Can you repeat the question, Mr. Wheeler? I'm not exactly sure of your point.
Yeah, if you look at the officer's report, it does appear to question the validity of the e-petition because it's been advertised on Facebook.
Mr. Littleton.
Look, I think the e-petition is closed. Council will. It was presented to council tonight. The city has undertaken a fairly substantial consultation process in relation to the ground lease with its Your Say page. So certainly social media was explored as an avenue to enable people to respond. E-petitions, by their nature, are considered, but we consider the merits of all of the consultation that and all of the mediums that is presented to the city.
Mr. Wheeler.
Okay. Mayor, Mr. Arnold Davis at the last meeting asked, will council rescind the motion which authorised the CEO of the City of Stirling to enter into negotiations with the shopping centre to sell off the Caron library site? The answer that was given in the minutes referenced a council resolution from June 2015, which, just like Goldilocks and Rumpelstiltskin and many other fairy stories, made no mention of such delegation. Council Resolution 0516024, however, made on the 3rd of May 2016, and you voted on this item, Mayor Owen, absolutely did resolve to give the CEO authority to enter into negotiations with AMP in regard to the library sites. It was passed by a 6-3 vote for a decision required under the Local Governments Act to be made by an absolute majority. 6 was not then and is still not an absolute majority. So to rephrase Mr. Arnold's question, Mayor Owen, given that the resolution was made ultra vires, will the council now rescind it?
I'm happy to investigate that, Mr. Wheeler, and respond to you in writing. I don't know. This is the first I've heard tonight, so I don't have it in front of me. So I'm happy to investigate it and respond to you in writing.
Okay. And on that one, last week, Mayor Owen, you promised Arnold an apology if it was found to be the case. But I think the city owes Arnold a bigger apology. Mr. Davis was informed by council on the 19th of April 2016, and I was at that meeting, that under its local laws, the city would from then on refuse to answer Mr. Davis's questions about the sale of the library site. The city listed 2 or 3 pages of Mr. Davis's questions. It appeared in an effort to belittle Arnold's constant questioning and underline the need and validity of the censure from the city on Arnold. Now, Mr. Zelestis QC, who is AMP Capital's barrister, confided in a 2015 DAP agenda, which is available at good libraries everywhere, in relation to the non-existence of an activity centre structure plan, notes that the city's requirements were that AMP agreed to purchase the library land. This is in 2015. AMP have confirmed that negotiations occurred in late 2014 or early 2015 for a potential purchase. So, Mayor, my question is, and these are all publicly available documents.
Sure.
I'm not claiming any secret squirrel here. My question is, other than making Mr Davis's apology monumental in nature, will the City, after some 5 years or more of misdirection, release a statement divulging the full history of negotiations with AMP Capital for sale or redevelopment of the Caron Library site, the CEO's and the previous Mayor's involvements and associated file notes to provide the transparency and accountability sadly lacking to date in this manner, and it's still going on today?
Thank you for that question, Mr Wheeler. And I wasn't on council until late 2015, and I'm unaware of that.
Well,
and I can tell you,
you're in the minutes as voting for it, so.
Yeah, maybe in late, not in the negotiations. There has been no negotiations.
I didn't say you
with
were in
AMP.
negotiations. I said the ex-mayor.
I will stand by it, Mr Wheeler. There has been no negotiations with AMP.
Sorry?
I will stand by that. I have not, or the CEO have not had open negotiations with AMP on the library site.
You should probably read the DAP report for the original approval
Yep.
for the shopping centre, because it's in there clear as day.
Thank you, Mr Wheeler. I'm happy to take that and take your information on those.
Thank you.
Ian Cornell.
Ian Cornell, ratepayer of Mount Lawley for the last 50 years. Good evening, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Cornell.
Councillors, executives, staff. My question, Mr Mayor, is somewhat less complicated than what you've had previously, and I've only have one question, so you'll make up some time.
Thank you.
I wrote to you last month, inviting yourself and both Lawley Ward councillors to a meeting and a tour of the locale with a couple of business proprietors and ratepayers of significant Mount Lawley Business Group. The subject is, of course, to further discuss the irrational decision to place a plaza within a car park, thus losing some 7 car bays, then closing the access from Beaufort Street. You declined the invitation to meet, contrary to the Local Government Act on engagement with ratepayers. Again, on the 3rd of October, I further proposed an offer to meet the same people, of which invitation still remains unanswered. I'm sure you'll get around to it. Does the 60 business proprietors and ratepayers on Beaufort Street need to be an AMP or equivalent to gain your interest in meeting with the elected ward with their elected ward representatives and publicly elected mayor of the city? That's question 1. Question 2, if not, can you advise what does it take?
That isn't that. I'm glad you think it's funny, Mr. Cornell. What I will do, and
Yes.
I'm glad you open it up, because I'm
Yes.
happy to make it transparent and put it in the minutes for the countless meetings that I've had with your group out there and the ratepayers have had and our officers have had. So I'll make sure it's transparent in the minutes of how many meetings we have had with yourselves.
Elected officials, Mayor.
Thank you.
Elected officials.
Happy to put it in writing for you, Mr. Cornell, and it will be in the minutes for everyone to see. Thank you for your questions.
Yeah, and you'll answer my correspondence.
Yes,
To the affirmative.
as I did. Are there any other questions? If not, I will go to item 8, applications for leave of absence. Councillors, are there any requests for leave of absence? Item 9, confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder to accept the council minutes of the 22nd September 2020 meeting? Move Councillor Spagnolo, seconder Councillor Proud. If we can go to the vote, please. We're missing Ferranti. Could we have someone to close the door, please? Migdale? Thank you. That is unanimous. Item 10, announcements by the presiding member. I do have a couple of announcements this evening. And the first announcement is I'm pleased to note that the City has received some great news last week following the federal and the state government budget announcements. with the City to receive a total of $102.5 million in funding. Following the Federal Government's 2020 budget announcement on Wednesday, 7th of October 2020, the City will receive over $64 million in funding for transport infrastructure projects. The infrastructure funding includes $45 million for the Stirling Bus Station interchange, $1,431,569 as part of the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program, $2 million for the Erindale Road, Reed Highway, Hammersley intersection, Urban Congestion Fund, $7.5 million for the Wanneroo Road, Morley Drive, Balcatta intersection upgrade, $1,394,753 as part of the Roads to Recovery Program, and $6,869,115 as part of the Financial Assistance Grant Program. On Thursday, 8th of October 2020, Premier Mark McGowan announced that the 2020-21 state government budget, which allocated a further $40 million towards the next phase of the Stevenson Avenue Extension project in the Stirling City Centre. This additional funding will ensure that all phases of this project can now be delivered, including a new freeway interchange and Sarich Court connection to Cedric Street. This is a significant investment in the City from both state and federal governments, which demonstrates the City's strong relationship with both governments and will greatly assist the City in delivering major transport infrastructure projects over the coming years. Overall, this is an outstanding achievement for Team Stirling, and I'd like to thank all councillors, the City's CEO, Stuart Jardine, the executive team and the staff for their efforts to advocate for priorities in the City of Stirling. The second announcement, on Friday 25th of September 2020, I attended the Walga Awards ceremony and annual general meeting which were held at Crown Perth. I'm pleased to advise that 7 of the City's elected members were presented with awards for the Walga Honours Award 2020, along with Local Government Officer. The Walga Honours Awards are a great opportunity to reflect and acknowledge the community representatives who are driving change and opportunities in our city. I would now like to call upon the award winners to present them with their awards. If you just maybe sit down until I finish them and then you can all stand up together. Councillor Sargent, Councillor Caddy, Councillor Ferrante and Councillor Lagan have received the Walga Merit Award for their personal commitment, eminent service and contribution to the local government sector. And if you'd all like to stand up. And if you can remain standing. Councillor Boothman and Councillor Proud have received the Walga Long and Loyal Service Award for long service of a high degree to local government and local government sector and Walga. And if you'd like to stand up. And if I could start, and I asked John Beaton to come forward. I know he's up the back there. John has worked at the City of Stirling since 2010 and has worked in the local government sector for 53 years. John was awarded the Local Government Distinguished Officer Award for his outstanding contributions made to the local government sector. And John, if you'd like to come forward, and councillors come forward, and I'll present you with your certificates.
Slow down a second, please, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Ferrante. Councillor Lagan. Councillor Boothman.
While you're all standing around, I thought, so you can have one photo together, I too would like to make an announcement, if that's okay, Mr. Mayor. I would like to acknowledge you, Mr. Mayor, Mark Irwin, who also received a Merit Award for personal commitment, eminent service and contribution to the local government sector from Walga. Congratulations.
Congratulations to the recipients. It really is great to see the City of Stirling being recognised as local government leaders. Stuart, as CEO, do you have anything further to add?
Yes, thank you. Congratulations, Mr Mayor and councillors. I'm delighted to see that our Senior Coordinator Corporate Compliance, John Beaton, has been recognised within the local government sector with a Distinguished Officer Award. John, as a widely respected local government professional, you always find a way to get the job done and done well. Having you on Team Stirling has made a huge difference. Personally, as a CEO and on behalf of the staff, congratulations, John.
Now brings on to item 11, which is unresolved business from previous meetings. I have nil. And item 12, reports and recommendations of committees. Councillors, will now move on to the CEO's Performance Review Committee item. We'll just pause while the CEO leaves the room. Now, as the item is confidential, councillors, if there is no debate on the item, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for council to vote on the committee's recommendation. If there is likely to be debate, if you could indicate, and we'll defer the item to the end of the meeting to go behind closed doors. If not, we'll have a mover, Councillor Sundry, seconder, Councillor Proud, and I'll put that to the vote. Noting that Councillor Ree has left the chamber. We have Councillor Ferranti. Councillor, I don't know if that's come up. Have we only got 12? Okay. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, we'll now move on to... We better get the CEO back in the room. Councillors, we'll now move to the Community and Resource Committee items. Any alternative motions that were submitted to Governance have been included together with your running sheet. Items 12.2 PRS1, item 12.2 PRS3, item 12.2 PRS4 and item 12.2 PRS6 are required to be pulled out this evening. Councillors, do you wish to pull out any other Community and Resource Committee items? Councillor Ree.
Yes, thank you. May I have 12.2 CC1 on page 12, please, and 12.2 RL1 on page 24, please.
Yes, any other councillors wish to pull anything out? If not, I will go... Let me see. Yeah, that won't take long. I'll go to item 12.2 CC1. Councillor Sargent, as Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to move the committee's recommendation. We do have a bit of extra wording on the white paper that everyone received on Friday. And if possible, Mr Mayor, I'd like to include that addition if we can.
That is possible. And is there a second for that motion? Councillor Proud. Anyone opposed? Councillor Ree. Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't have very much further to add on this one, Mr Mayor. The reasoning behind the red in the on the screen there, Mr Mayor, is we had a deputy come to a committee last week and had a bit of an issue around some of the wording that was within the policy, and subsequently the officers have gone and had a chat with the deputy and came up with a bit of extra wording there that pretty much concretes it down a bit. So I'll leave it at that and hear what the debate is. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Proud. Thank you. Councillor Ree.
Thank you. Whilst I agree with a lot of the things actually in this particular policy, I'd like some questions answered, please. On page 16, where we've got the impact assessment is identified as the community is considered low, elected members are considered moderate, administration considered low. Could I please have an explanation as why the community, which is get affected the most, is not a high?
Ms Pickering.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for your question, Councillor Ree. This assessment has been done based on just the amendment to the policy, so the results of that particular assessment through the e-tool is only the amendment to the policy. So we consider the community impact of that amendment to be low because it's really just building on the original policy, which related to creating procedures and replacing that with an e-tool. So we felt that community impact was low, and likewise the impact to council was also low. Moderate, sorry.
Councillor Ree?
I think that needs to maybe be referred to when we review the whole policy in their entirety. And I think it becomes confusing to people when we change one little bit of the policy and we can't change other parts in the one meeting. It seems to be a management issue that's time consuming. So I think that needs to address. Page 21, we've got definitions. If we look at page 26, we have got, in page 26, we have got, oops, there we are. We have got 25, we've got engages and supports and considers. I have asked several times before what the definition of considers is. I've asked also what the definition of endorsed. I'm now more confused because we've now got the word engaged. When we look at page 21, we've got all these definitions. Where is engaged, concerned, or anything else endorsed? If we're going to use that sort of nomenclature out to the community, if we're going to use it as a recommendation, then we need to have a definition. Otherwise, it's an interpretation by whomever reads it.
Ms Pickering, would you like to provide any comment to that?
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. On page 21, we do have a definition for community and stakeholder engagement, which is the third one down in the definition list, and then a further definition around community consultation, which is a subset of community engagement. But if we're required, or if it makes it helpful to put in additional definitions, we can certainly add those in.
Councillor Ree?
Thank you. That's wonderful, Mrs Pickering, because if we're going to use the word note, concern, engage, then we need to have a definition. And even though it might be captured under a broader definition, those particular words that are being used, the adjective that's describing what we're doing, is nowhere. So I appreciate that. As an example, if I may, I'm just also concerned the way this process is done. And if I could please have clarification, will this address the issue regarding street trees? Because with street trees, as we know, and I'm interested to know, we haven't had anyone from street trees, which means obviously the planting season's finished, that with street trees, they get a letter, and within sometimes a week or 2 weeks, they get a tree. They have no choice on the tree, no choice on location. They've got no choice on anything. And people are getting very upset, as we're well aware.
Let's stick to this item, Councillor Ree.
Well, that's my point.
No, it's a separate item.
No.
It's a completely separate item you're talking about. Let's stick to this, please.
Well, this policy is supposed to be about community and stakeholder engagement. My question is, with the street tree letter, which is supposed to be part of community and stakeholder engagement, will that be captured in this policy, please?
Mr Littleton?
Yeah, look, thank you for the question. Look, the policy in front of you and the e-tool is largely around is project based. The street tree program is program based. So it does talk in the policy around you know where feedback may not be sought. It's the matter is delivering a policy driven decision. Having said that, the consultation process that we put around the street tree process is quite considered. I would argue that we do send letters out preemptively. We do seek and receive feedback around location and tree species, and you know we also receive feedback around no trees at all. We generally respond to all of those requests, and in the majority, those issues are dealt with appropriately. What I would say is that we are currently reviewing our street tree planting program at the moment in light of the general views that have been expressed, to make sure that it is more targeted in the future. We will be engaging with Marielle's team and Josh in particular, just to make sure that that the street trees and our footpath program is responsive to community as it can be, and is consistent with the broader issues in this policy.
Councillor Ree.
Thank you. So the answer is no. Thank you.
Councillor Caddy.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I'm very supportive of this, but I do have a small concern about the changes that have been proposed in red, particularly the last part of the sentence that says, and further changes are made to the proposal. The changes should be advertised for a further 21 days. So my concern is about how restrictive that is, because often after consultation, when something comes back to council, we will then make changes based on the consultation. Having made changes based on the consultation, we then don't want to have to go back out to consultation, which seems to be what that's implying. So can I get some clarification or perhaps a modification to those words? Because I'm just worried that we're kind of tying ourselves into a bit of a bind.
Yeah, let's go for Mr Blanchard on that one.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is a council policy, and when a matter comes before council, council is able to apply its policy reasonably in the circumstances. So if council doesn't consider that any changes warrant further advertising, council doesn't have to. And I think the final words of the policy state that council can certainly decide not to go out to advertising again.
So an example would be, for instance, some of our planning policies when we go out for consultation and then we come back and we take that consultation on board and we make some amendments. We then have to state in the resolution that council is basically waiving the need to go out for further consultation. Is that the way we would handle it?
Mr Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think planning policies are a different category, because the consultation under planning is governed by a statutory regime, and we may find ourselves running up against statutory timeframes if we were to do that. This is more project based and is in relation to projects that are being undertaken by the city, and certainly if the intention of council is not to re-advertise, then that would be clear from the council resolution.
Councillor Caddy.
Look, I think that
would you like to propose
I would actually
an
like
amendment?
the phrase removed from "should the outcomes of advertising be formally presented to council," but I'm happy whether the mover and seconder are happy with that. If not, I'm happy that we can probably manage it.
Let's just get Mr Blanchard to comment and see if we can help out.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Potentially the word "should" could be changed to the word "may."
Let's just... Councillor Sargent and Councillor Proud, are you happy with those changes?
That's fine with me.
Okay, we're happy to just accept those in an amendment. All right. Anyone else like to speak on this item? Councillor Farrelly?
I forgot to put my, sorry. When I'm just referring to the actual document itself, and it might not be part of the process, so please do tell me. But it's how the city may engage, when the city may engage, the principles guiding the city's approach to community and stakeholder engagement, and when feedback may not be sought. One of the points is the feedback may not be sought when the city is not the decision maker and has no ability to influence the decision. I believe that in some of the regions, such as the Scarborough redevelopment area, ratepayers will probably be looking for the city to make some comment, even if it is not able to be the decision maker. Page 19. Be the decision maker and has no ability to influence the decision. I think that there is a need in the community to have the city comment on issues that may arise in some of those instances. So I'd like to see I'd like to actually see that disappear out of those lists of when feedback may not be sought.
Thank you. All right.
No, just that one point. Thank you.
Who's got that? Ms Pickering, are you able to provide some comments?
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. This paragraph is really about when it may not be sought. So it's really, it doesn't say that we won't seek it. It's just if there are cases where the city isn't a decision maker and has no ability to influence a decision, then under those circumstances, we may not seek feedback. It doesn't say we definitely won't seek feedback. So.
Through you, Mr Chair, I'd like to not see it as a default position. I'd like to see the first position being that there is an opportunity for the city to make some comment. So I'd hate to see it never, appear because it's in the communication policy. I'll leave it at this at the moment, but that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else like to comment? If not, I'll go to Councillor Sargent to close debate.
I don't really have much further to add to this, Mr Mayor. Only to Councillor Farrelly that when this policy comes back to Council to be reviewed, then perhaps you can address those concerns then. I'll close with that.
Thank you, Councillor. And with that, close the debate, so we'll put that to the vote. Thank you, councillors, and that motion is carried. And we have 4, Councillor Boothman, Caddy, Ferrante, Lagan, Migdal, Perkoff, Proud, Rees, Handry, Sargent, Spagnolo, Thornton and myself, and against Councillor Farrelly. We'll now go to item 12.2 RL1, the bicycle skills track in the Doubleview ward. Councillor Sargent is chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And as Chair of Committee, I will have to move the committee's recommendation to Council, which actually is a procedural motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Proud. And that is a procedural motion to hold this item over. So I will put that motion. We've got Lagan and Ree. And that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. No? Oh, that's why it doesn't add up. Noting Councillor Thornton's out of the chamber. We'll now go on to item 12.2, PRS1, the new ground lease over portion of Crown Reserve 12992, Lot 8, house number 368, West Coast Drive, Trig, to Surfing WA. Absolute majority vote is required for this one. It's been the subject of a petition. And I'll go to Councillor Sargent as chair of the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Councillor Caddy will articulate this one far better than I, so I'll hand over to her.
Councillor Caddy.
Thank you, and I move the committee's recommendation to Council as printed on page 146.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Farrelly. Is there anyone opposed? Councillor Ree. I'll go to you, Councillor Caddy.
Yes. Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. As councillors will be aware, particularly those councillors who were at committee last Tuesday, Surfing WA is an enormous asset to the Trig region. They are a community-based sporting organisation and they provide more than 30,000 participants a year with learn to surf classes. They're coached. They support 120 primary and secondary schools, providing coaching and training in both surfing and water safety activities. They employ more than 50 staff to do this, many of which, or the majority of which, are City of Stirling residents. And they run a number of surf competitions at our Trig location. And those learn to swim and safety classes, learn to surf, sorry, and safety classes, about 75 to 80% of those are run out of Trig Beach. So Surfing WA have a massive presence currently at Trig Beach and are greatly supportive of the community activities at Trig Beach. But they're doing all of this out of a tiny shed that is way short of what they need to operate. Actually, I can't believe that they managed to provide that level of service out of the tiny shed that they've been operating in. The city has been in discussions with Surfing WA for a considerable period of time about moving them and providing them with a better facility. And thankfully, through the last federal government funding round, Surfing WA was able to get a grant for $4 million to redevelop their building, which is amazing. It means that the City of Stirling doesn't have to provide any financial contribution towards that. All they're asking from us is a parcel of land on which to build this facility. Now, so we're being asked to endorse the ground lease. The area of land that they're seeking is one that we've been discussing with them for at least 10 years that I'm aware of, and was part of the original Trig master plan. I think there's been some misconceptions that they're seeking to clear bushland to redevelop. They're not. The parcel of land is within the Bush Forever zone, but is not bushland. Just for context, also within this Bush Forever zone is St Mary's Primary School and the Millington Oval. So there are a number of areas within this Bush Forever zone that are not bushland. This is one of them. It is a turfed park. It sits between two very large car parks. And one of the really big reasons why we wanted to move the Trig Surf facility down to this location is because of its proximity to the two very large car parks. They service a large number of schools, as I said. A lot of buses bring students here, and the proximity to the car parking is really important for them. Very importantly, it also takes congestion away from the North Trig area and spreads the use across the North and South Trig areas. We get a number of complaints every summer from patrons trying to use Trig Beach that they can't get a park to the north. And in the last 5 years, the city has spent, I think, $300,000 providing additional car parking up there. This will help to alleviate the car parking congestion and mean we won't have to fork out more money for more car parking. A number of different sites have already been considered. This was by far and away the best site for this use. Surfing WA, as I said, we want to keep them at Trig. They support our local community. They save lives on our beaches. They're an amazing community organisation. They're also now an Olympic sport, by the way, and it's kind of embarrassing that they're operating out of this little shed. We can't expand their footprint on the current location. We have no option but to move them. I actually think this is a no-brainer. This is absolutely the right location for them, and it's absolutely so important that we keep their presence in Trig so that they can continue to do the good community work they're doing there.
Thank you. Councillor Farrelly.
Thank you through you, Mr Mayor. I am also supporting this, and I spoke to the CRC meeting last week, even though I am not a sitting councillor on that. And the reason is that although we've had a lot of information that this is actually is a bushland, Bush Forever site, as my fellow councillors indicated, it's not. It is within the zone, but it is actually a grassed area. It has, the way they're proposing to build is that they will retain as many of the trees as possible. Two may have to go. We are not looking at a complete demolition of a connection between animal life, moving through the Trig bushland to the beach. That is still there in the continuance between the bushland and the beach land as well. The other side of it is that, and I'm not going to go in great detail because I think my fellow councillor has mentioned a lot of the things that Surfing WA have achieved, but I think we have to recognise that it's a group of volunteers that have got an international competition in Western Australia, down south at the Margaret River Pro. That is an amazing opportunity for all the youth in our state to be involved in. They're running that, as has been mentioned, from a very small, what was initially, I understand, it was the change rooms up there at Trig Island. And I do recall when they first moved in there, and it was a very small operation, and they have achieved that amazingly well. The way it's run there and the design down there is magnificent. The opportunity to get an iconic design up at Trig Island, which will fit into the landscape, not overtake the landscape. I don't think as many people will be aware that it's there. The indications are, if the build is done as they are planning, that it'll be actually one of those places where people will be pleased to see it on the landscape. The other side of that is that they are promoting a sport that is enabling all the youth in Perth to be a part of a much bigger opportunity in their lives, and it has been a really fruitful collaboration with the youth of particularly our areas. As a councillor in the Coastal Ward, I'm really happy for it to stay with us, otherwise I could see it going down south as the other big venue they run. I noticed that there was a lot of information about the Margaret River Classic bringing in the money. That may be the case, but the fact is all the interaction with a lot of the youth of the area occurs here and also the beaches around. So this is where predominantly it is the greatest asset to have, that particular development. At the moment, there are plant and equipment that are in the volunteers' backyards. There's not enough room for them to house it where they currently are at the Trig Island. And they do need to have that as part of the general process when they're running surfing carnivals. And I think they've done extremely well since 95, when they moved into that building, to have put on what they've done, to have catered for the youth. And I recently was at the Groundswell Festival handing out some trophies to not just the guys but the girls there, and amazing set of skills that they all showed, and I was really pleased to do so. Quite a difference when I was a teenager and those sort of things weren't really offered to girls. So I'm fully supportive of this. I think they've asked everyone opinion. They've asked Friends of Trig Beachland and Friends of Trig Bushland in the early start of their appraisal, and I've certainly been asking around both those groups and also Surfing WA and the planning and other directors here. I think it's been a very comprehensive undertaking that put in place before this came here now tonight to the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farrelly. Councillor Ree.
Thank you. I'd like to move a procedural motion, please.
Sure. To hold it over.
Yes.
Why can't she?
Don't know how many mayors are around the table. They're all award winners, aren't they?
Okay, so you'd like to hold it over?
Yes, please.
That the item be referred to CRC on the 10th of November. Thank you. All right, John, a seconder for that.
For the reasons.
Seconded, Councillor Thornton.
Do you want me to read it?
It's up on the board. It's clear. What would you like to read?
Well, the people behind wouldn't be able to see because your head's in the way, Mr Mayor.
It's not that big, Councillor.
I know.
You may read it if you'd like.
If it's up further, it might help.
Just read it, Councillor.
That the item, the new ground lease of the portion of Crown Reserve 1299-2, Lot 8, house number 368, West Coast Drive, Trig, to Surfing WA Inc. be referred to the Community and Resource Committee meeting to be held 10th of November 2020 to allow for officers to address the issues raised from the community, to provide alternative locations for consideration, to evaluate a new building on the existing building envelope, and to provide legal advice on the use of the State Government Bush Forever site.
Thank you, Councillor. And that is a procedure. We have a seconder with Councillor Thornton, so I will put that to the vote. Thank you, councillors. And that motion is lost 2-12, with Councillor Ree and Thornton voting for and other councillors voting against. Councillor Ree, would you like to debate against the substantive motion?
I think we're a bit more confused, and I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Caddy's comment about the misconceptions of what people have written. I don't think anybody's sitting there saying whether or not that this, whether Surfing WA has done a good job or a bad job, or what it's done for the community. And I think Councillor Farrelly's comments are quite true, that they've done an excellent job. I don't think that's the issue, and I think that's where we've got the misconception. It's not the issue of whether or not they've done a good job or not, because I think everybody says they have, which they have. The issue is building on a Bush Forever site. The issue is building more on a Bush Forever site than we had before. That's the issue. It's not whether or not they deserve it. It's not whether or not they should have it. It's not whether or not they do a good job. The fact is where the location is. The whole reason we have Bush Forever sites gazetted is to ensure that we have a green footprint, an environmental footprint, that we are trying to make the best. We keep talking about our million trees. Why have a million trees? Well, let's plant them, but let's just destroy 10. Is that how we're doing the maths? This is what supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be protecting the environment. That's why we're decision makers. I don't see any reason why we can't redevelop on the footprint they've got. I don't know why we can't redevelop somewhere else on the site. I mean, there's a lot of potential down there that can be rejigged if we wanted to without reusing what's already there that's bush. That is my whole point. It's got nothing to do with whether they're good, bad or ugly, because I think that's already been established, and that is where the misconception is, and that's where the scaremongering is. It's nothing to do with it. I think it's totally about where it's supposed to be, and that is the issue. There is no reason why they can't redevelop right where they are, a better building, make it fit for purpose. It'll be excellent. By putting it on another site, they're actually limiting their ability to use that flat land as well. And I know fair well, my sons did it as well. My auntie lives across the road, and I, like a few others around the room, grew up down at Scarborough, grew up down at Triggs. We know what it's like. I can even walk there now. It takes me a bit longer, but I can walk there. You know, so we know how important it is down there, but we also know how important every little bit of land is. To take away that land that's there is so wrong, and we're supposed to be the gatekeepers. I think it's so important that we use what we've got there, redevelop it where it is actually on the site. That's what is good governance. That is what we're looking for the environment, and I think that's what's important. And to sit there and camouflage it all with they're good or they've done this, that and the next thing, that doesn't take away our responsibility. This is about a ground lease. It's not about Groundhog Day of whether or not we get up every day and we do the same thing and we make it better. That's not what we're here for. We're here to sit there and make better use of the land and be responsible. And our responsibility is right there, looking after the Bush Forever site, looking after places and organisations that do the right thing. Surfing WA does do the right thing by our youth. It does do the right thing by keeping people active. It does have a great following. That's never ever been disputed. It's where it is that is being disputed. And I'm sure if the officers worked with them, we could actually rejig that site, redevelop it where it is today. And I'm sure that would make most sense to more people. They would still get what they want, the environmentalists would get what they want, and we wouldn't be compromising where we are today. Now, before I end, I'd like the legality, please, which is one of the issues that I raised, that it is very disturbing a report only sits there and goes through a whole lot of things that are not relevant to what we're supposed to be doing that's about a ground lease. The thing is, it is a Bush Forever site which is not mentioned in this report, which, as the CEO mentioned beforehand, the whole reason we have reports is that we make informed decisions. We can't make informed decisions if we don't have all the information. This is a Bush Forever site, which Mr. Littleton confirmed to me in writing. Why isn't it in the report? Number one. And number two, where is the legality of us allowing and our approval, because it's actually not our land,
Point
to
of order,
allow
Mr.
development, please?
Thanks. What's your point of order?
My point of order, Mr. Mayor, is that we did receive a memo that covered the Lands Act with regard to Bush Forever and the allowances that apply with regard to the use of this land.
Thank you.
So suggesting that we're not fully informed is incorrect.
Thank you, Councillor. And I was about to go to Mr. Littleton to clarify the white paper that all councillors received that clarified all that. Mr. Littleton.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Look, just to confirm, there is no legal impediment to the city actually constructing or permitting a ground lease over Bush Forever. We did provide that clarity to council through the white paper, but just to be absolutely crystal clear, there is no legal impediment to us supporting a ground lease over this site.
Councillor Thornton.
May I finish, please, Mr Mayor?
You're out of time.
Well, I'd like to make just a small
quick one.
comment that my comment regarding informed decisions, Councillor Logan,
Through
is
the
that
chair,
it
thank you,
wasn't
Councillor.
in the report. That it wasn't in the report. It might have been in the white paper, which the public doesn't get access to.
It was,
So
it was
therefore-
attached to the agenda in a white paper to all councillors. Let's be
Wasn't in
clear.
the original.
Councillor Thornton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, first and foremost, this item is a planning issue. It's also an issue of loss of amenity. I think it's beside the point about a club being deserving of it or not. That's a given. We know that they're very deserving, so are many other clubs in our city. But this is a planning issue that we have to address. And with the other, I believe the other thing that we also have to consider is that it was strongly opposed by the local people. We had 472 people that democratically signed that petition. They weren't coerced. They weren't misled. They don't want that particular site being used. Also, I would like to point out that the Trig Master Plan has a number of items on there that weren't actually also in the report that were, you know, if we're giving such weight to the master plan, why aren't we also considering point 58, which is to enlarge and enhance the existing park there that this proposed building, this ground lease is going to, or the building is going to be built on, and also part 59 or point 59 that there's more native trees in the parkland. Why isn't that also in the report? It's really disappointing that we've only just considered and looked at one aspect, and that's just building of that in the master plan and not the other points that if this should hold so much weight, then we should be considering everything in the Trig Master Plan. I also find it really hard to believe that there's not another suitable site. We have two huge car parks there, which are about 200 metres long each by 40 metres long, and we have to pick the greenest,
Through the chair, thank you,
luscious,
Councillor.
we have to pick the greenest, lushest, most treed spot in that whole area. And by building this building here, we're going to remove the amenity for the local people and also our visitors. I just find it, really hard to believe that we can't come up with another location within that vicinity. So in conclusion, I just think that we should really be trying to find win-win situations, and I don't believe this is one of them. I think by removing this public green open space, we're not listening to the community, and the community have spoken. They're strongly opposed to this, and I believe that there's better locations for it, and we should be looking at those.
Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Perkoff.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And can I thank the ward councillors for their comments and their vision. Now, Mr Mayor, as many here would know, through my social media, I spend a good deal of time down at Trig Beach with my family. Love the place. Look, I'm not a surfer, but frankly, I'm very excited by the prospect of this development, which will become the new home to Surfing WA. Now, Mr Mayor, as they say in the movies, build it and they will come, but it is important that it's built thoughtfully and inclusively of the greenery and the vegetation becoming of those sand dunes and the proximity to the ocean. Now, I will be supporting this motion this evening, and I know that this building will become the jewel in the crown for Surfing WA.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Proud.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to Mr Littleton, if I could please. At committee last week, I did ask the legal financial implications of $4,000, and I just wonder if Mr Littleton has had time since last week to actually address that with Surfing WA. My thought was I would prefer that to be coming out of their coffers and the grant money they got rather than City of Stirling coffers, because we'd get a few bench seats, etc., out of $4,000. Thank you.
Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Worship. Look, no, we haven't spoken to Surfing WA at this point in time, but I'm very sure that they'd love to cover those legal fees, councillors. look, I can't guarantee that, but I'm sure we'll have a conversation.
Well, thank you. I can't, obviously, I'm not proposing to add anything here, but just to follow, how do we follow through on that and make sure that they're very happy and they've granted it?
Thanks, Councillor Pratt.
Well, that had a question mark after it.
Did it?
Yeah.
Okay, it was cryptic. Mr Littleton.
Look, I just confirm, we'll certainly follow that up once a determination's made tonight.
You'll try hard, right? Thank you.
Councillors, are there anyone else who'd like to speak to this? If not, I'll go to Councillor Caddy to close debate. Councillor Spagnolo.
Don't worry, Mr Mayor, I'll be very quick. Yeah, look, it's a shame when you've got two communities, one supporting something and one not supporting something. Look, we all know the good work that the WA Surfing Association does. They do a great job out there. A lot of it's voluntary and, you know, they're certainly recognised for that. I think the important thing is that we have had a lot of complaints or objections. There have been 400. It's a shame that we can't find some common ground. Look, my view on this is the ward councillors obviously have done their research and they believe that it is suitable. And on that basis, I'm happy to support them. But we need to be mindful that there are people out there that have some concerns. And it would be nice, on the way, if we could actually look at addressing some of those concerns. Obviously, we can't address the main thing, which is the location, but they've raised a few other things which I think are important. And, you know, perhaps, as I say, on the way, we could look at those as well.
Thank you. And no other indication, I'll go to Councillor Caddy to close debate.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I think most of the concerns are around the location, and I can absolutely assure everyone that over the time that I've been on council, we've certainly looked at many different locations, and this one is the one that stacks up. We can't build it on the car park because we need the car parking to support the facility. Most of the area around Trigg Beach is actually bushland. This is one of the few spots at Trigg Beach that isn't actually bushland. And one of the criteria we stipulated to Surfing WA right at the start of this discussion was you absolutely need to minimise the impact on this bushland because, you know, that is very precious to us. So part of the reason that it is being built on this little piece of parkland that is grassed is because this is the area where it has least disturbance on the bushland. So I think we really need to understand that just because it's a bush forever zone doesn't mean we're allowing them to build, doesn't mean we're turning our back on conservation, because it has absolutely been strongly stipulated that the site must be chosen to minimise the impact on the dunes, and in fact it has virtually none. And I think it's important for councillors to understand that the DEWA have been consulted and have confirmed that a clearing permit is not required because it is predominantly cleared area and will have no impact on nearby vegetated area or ecosystems. So it's not just us who've made that conclusion, DEWA have as well. Look, it is the best location. Everything is a compromise. I understand that some of the community are concerned about the loss of this little piece of park, but it is important for councillors to understand that Clarko Reserve, which is a massive public park, is less than 300 metres up the road. So while I understand the community's concerns, and we will be working with Surfing WA, in fact discussions have already been had about how we can try to coexist as best as possible on this parkland and provide as much residual amenity for the community as we can. It does come down to a compromise. There's no other place to put it, and we need to retain them at Trigg. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And with that, that closes debate. So I will put that item, move Councillor Caddy, seconded Councillor Farrelly. If you could all vote, please. Have Lagan to vote, thanks, and Caddy. Thank you, councillors, and that motion is carried. And for we have councillors Boothman, Caddy, Farrelly, Ferrante, Lagan, Migdal, Perkoff, Proud, Sandri, Sargent, Spagnolo, Thornton and myself. And against Councillor Ree. Thank you. That's done, surfing, WA, yeah, if you want. And it's, I'll now move on to item 12.2, PRS 3, acquisition, closure and dedication of right-of-way 29022 being lot 66, house number 46R, Normanby Road, Inglewood. Outcomes of advertising. There is a financial proximity interest, so Councillor Sandri will also leave the chamber. Councillor?
Excuse me, through the chair, I would like to speak to 12.2 PRS 2, and I'm sorry when that was being asked at the start. That is the terms of reference and appointment of strategic property advisory group.
Let me check. I don't know if we can still pull it out.
Okay.
But
Let's
deal with this one and we'll go back. We'll talk to governance and find out. So item 12.2 PRS 3, Councillor Sandri has left the chamber. Councillor Sargent as chair of the committee.
I'm cringing a little bit, Mr. Mayor. I will move the committee's recommendation.
Don't cringe, Councillor Sargent. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Meekdale, is anyone opposed? Councillor Lagan? Councillor Sargent?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the reason I cringed a little bit was this got a lot of discussion at committee, and it ended up coming down to a casting vote in the end because it was a half-half kind of situation. So, Mr. Mayor, this has come to committee as a result of the residents wanting to close a portion of a right-of-way. This right-of-way is a T-junction, and they want to create a L-shaped right-of-way by closing off a portion of it. In the report today, it has 3 different options on what we can do with this right-of-way. We can allow the resident to close off this portion that they're requesting and give the other part of the T, top of the T, if you will, to the City of Stirling. We can do nothing, or we can actually purchase this right away. The recommendation on the board, Mr. Mayor, is to allow the resident to take control of their portion of the right away that they currently own and cede off the rest of it. For me, generally, Mr. Mayor, when I went into committee, I had this thought that the officer's recommendation wasn't too bad. So I was leaning towards that recommendation, which is on the board tonight, Mr. Mayor. But the only questions I kind of had was around if we close off that portion of the right-of-way, will they have enough access within the right-of-way for the community today and going into the future to get in and out of there? So that was one question I had in my head. And the other one was, as Councillor Lagan put it at committee last week, the creation of a super block and what the development potential of that block ended up being. So those were the 2 questions I had in my head when I went to committee. Now, Councillor Lagan spoke quite animately at committee, which actually made me want to actually go down there, Mr. Mayor, and see this right away for myself. And that's exactly what I did on the weekend. I snapped a few pictures, and thank you to the officers for sending it to all councillors, and I hope all councillors have had the opportunity to see the pictures that I took on the weekend. And there were 3 pictures there, Mr. Mayor, and they were basically, if you think of a T, one portion of the T was paved, and that's the section that was going to be ceded off to us. And then the second portion of that T had a trailer parked in the way and a car at the other end parked in the way. So my first thought at the time, Mr. Mayor, was they're using it like they own it, which, funny enough, they do own it. So that trailer seems to be there at all times. Now, I must admit, Mr. Mayor, that when I went there, I had every thought of walking every inch of that right-of-way so I get a good idea of what's going on with that right-of-way. And then I got to the long end of the T, and I was about to walk down it when I saw the grass was higher than this table. And I thought, no, there could be some snakes and spiders and God knows what else going on in there. And I didn't want to risk me not enlightening council here tonight by getting myself injured in some way whatsoever. So I chose not to go against my first thoughts and walk down that the entire length of the right-of-way. So that was my little excursion out there to actually have a look. Now, my main concern, as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Mayor, was around access and and I was satisfied by actually going there that the right-of-way is wide enough to get 2 cars going by there. The potential development of the area, if anyone wants to go into the right-of-way, build into the right-of-way, shall I say, there should be plenty of room there for any vehicles to pass each other. So that to me was so ticked off, so I wasn't so concerned over that anymore. The L-shaped right-of-way isn't a concern to me once it gets built up, mainly because we do have examples across the City of Stirling of other L-shaped right-of-ways that don't cause us any grief at all. So that to me will work. So I was left with, as Councillor Lagan calls it, a super block. What could they possibly develop on this block if they were to get the potential of the right-of-way? And to me, that is the only concern once I eliminated all the rest of it. So the officers have released some information to us that potentially they can build 4, possibly 5 residences on this particular block. The issue is, though, it is in a HPA area, and that HPA area makes it very difficult for these houses to be knocked down to reach their full development potential. And the other issue that that has been highlighted is along the laneway that they wish to acquire, the sewage pipe runs under it. So they won't actually be able to build anywhere near that, that particular right-of-way that they want to acquire. So it does restrict what they can do with that block. So when you look at it and you're getting 3 or 4, possibly 5 maybe if buts, then to me the idea is they should be okay with access to that laneway and getting to and from. So I'll finish with that, Mr Mayor. I think I've spoke long enough about it, and I'll hear the debate. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Mcdale.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I think that Councillor Sargent has articulated this scenario very well. I don't know that there's much more that I could add. I too have been down there and had a look and found much of a muchness to Councillor Sargent. So I feel that whilst in developing there are going to be a fair wad of hiccups, if the idea of it to me is fairly benign. So I support this item. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. And can I just highlight Councillor Sargent's points that I did speak animatedly at the committee meeting on this.
You certainly did, Councillor.
Can I also say that my animation is not about the individuals who are applying for this and who have approached the city for this. In fact, I've met with the individuals and other elected members have as well on site. These are good people. My main issue is that we may be setting a precedent here that I'm not happy with. A couple of things before I begin in debate. I'm looking at the City of Stirling. It's available on the website right now. Rights of Way Management Strategy 2009. When I look at the section Rights of Way Closure, it's Council Policy N101008. There's a long spiel about what happens when the policy allows for the city to consider closing or closing a portion of a right-of-way. And that statement that highlights that policy closes by saying it also sets out the procedure involved in the closure process and the city's role therein, and specifies that council support for a closure application is also dependent on the support of all adjoining property owners. I've been approached by 3 property owners, 2 of whom I door knocked who are unsure, and 1 who has contacted me and 1 who presented at committee last week, so that's 4 total. So there are 2 that do not support this particular recommendation to council. In the policy, given that it says that it's suggested we don't act if we don't have full support, I have a concern. Can I just ask through you to the officers, does that policy still stand?
Ms Littleton?
Yes, that's the current policy of council. The difference here, of course, is that the three properties that directly abut this section of right-of-way that is proposing to be closed have support. That's the clarity.
Okay, so that was really, it's all about semantics. It's the word all. And yes, there are some that are somewhat wavering, but that doesn't support all. Now, through you, Mr Mayor, can I just read from another policy? It says the West Australian Planning Commission and the Department of Land Information have the procedure for closure of roads and rights of ways. Prior to initiating the closure procedure, however, it's essential that the city determine that adjoining owners are in support of the closure. A closure of a right-of-way must then be subdivided and sold to the adjoining landowners, as the Department of Land Information is not willing to support the creation of alienated land. So my question through you to the officers is, if we close a section of this right-of-way, so that's the bottom section of 29022, do we, the city, then create a situation of alienated land?
I can probably answer that. No, because it's in private ownership already. Mr Littleton?
Yeah, look, to clarify, we don't actually own the right-of-way, it is a right-of-way that's in private ownership. It has not yet been acquired by the state and therefore vested in the care, control and management of the city. The proposal in front of council is that the rights the easement rights that are provided to the three properties, 25, 23 and 21, are extinguished in exchange for the gifting of the remainder of the private right-of-way to the state, which would then be vested to the city. So in answer to the question, there would be no alienated land, and the policy provisions are talking about the closure of a right-of-way that is informal state ownership. The difference here is that it's in private ownership, and the proposed acquisition and dedication has been spoken to with the Department of Planning, Land and Heritage, just to ensure that they are supportive of the proposal.
Okay, thank you. So further to that question, the blocks, and they're listed on one of the maps, I think it was 26 and 25, they're at the end that back onto this section of right-of-way that we're going to close. If in the future they wish to follow our rights-of-way policy and develop to the back of their block with an access to the right-of-way, under this scenario, they won't be able to do that because that right-of-way will be closed. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So
in
they
essence, that's my concern. That's another one of my concerns. That when we talk about alienation, this is exactly what I believe we're doing. We're going to take away the rights of two property owners now or into the future to do exactly what we encourage other property owners to do on our rights of way, which is to develop to the back of your block and access the right of way. That's why I would like to foreshadow, that we move option 3, that we not proceed. And the reason I would like to foreshadow that is because I don't, as I said in committee, see need and nexus. At the moment it's not being used, but I don't want to lock into the future a situation where people come back to us and say, well, hang on a minute, you've stopped my right to develop on what was a right-of-way that you could have done two things with. You could have purchased it outright, not just one end, or you could have left it as it was, and in years to come, when we might develop, then we could have dealt with that issue then. So I foreshadow that.
That's noted, Councillor. Foreshadow.
So yeah, at committee I spoke at length, and really the nexus for me is that...
just about 15 seconds, Councillor.
Yeah, simply I don't see a need and nexus at the moment, but I do see problems when we move forward. I understand what the owner is doing, and in fact, in some respects, what the owner is doing is very laudable in gifting one end of the right-of-way and then giving up the problems that come with trying to upkeep that end of the right-of-way, which has already had 3 properties built on it that the city allowed to be built and has access to that. Can I request an extension then?
You may.
Happy to move an extension.
Thanks. Yep. Moved. Seconded, Councillor Spagnolo. All those in favour, just show of hands quickly, councillors. It's unanimous, thank you.
Thank you, I won't be much longer. So we've allowed a build of 3 properties. They access what is a bitumenised section that was not bitumenised by the city. In fact, is in private ownership. The owner has said, I don't want to look after that piece of land. In fact, the owner told me she didn't bitumenise it. It was done as part of us allowing the development to happen. When the development happened, those 3 properties are paying rates. If they're paying rates like everybody else, they should be getting a right-of-way upgrade like everyone else in Inglewood, if indeed that right-of-way comes into the list of right-of-ways that needs to be upgraded. Need and nexus for me says, not now, maybe sometime in the future. We do nothing now, bring this back to council sometime in the future, and my option would be buy it outright, and we follow the same process we do with all other rights-of-ways. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. And that closes that debate. Is there anyone else who'd like to indicate? Councillor Caddy.
Yeah, really just a clarifying question through yourself, Mr Mayor. We've heard from Councillor Sargent that the piece of land that we're proposing to close is not being used as a right-of-way. It's not servicing any purpose. Councillor Lagan's concern is that we're removing potential in the future, but I've also heard from the officers that all of the adjoining landowners to the bit we want to close are happy to have it closed. And that I heard you say that all of the adjoining landowners are actually happy to have it closed. Can I just get, I'm not seeing any loss of opportunity, but I'm wondering if I'm missing something. So can I just get some clarification?
I can clarify, you're not missing anything. I think what Councillor Lagan is, correct me if I'm wrong, is saying that if someone was to buy that block, one of those blocks in future, then they haven't got the right to be able to develop on that right of way. But that would obviously go with the
just
property
a
zone.
correction, it's not the blocks that are in the ownership of the current owners, it's the 2 blocks further up. The closing of that section will stop them in the future having the right to develop to the back of their block and accessing that right of way.
Yeah, but the 2...
And all other blocks in the
Sorry,
area
but
do
to
have
clarify
that right.
this, so the 3 blocks that abut onto that section of the right of way, one of them is in the private ownership of the person who has the right of way. The other 2 people who abut that have said they want the right of way closed. So they know they're losing that right, and if they sold their block in the future, the person would purchase that block without that right to access that right of way.
Mr Med, sorry, just to correct my interpretation when I door-knocked those individuals was they were not entirely au fait with all the implications that came with the closure of that section of the right-of-way?
Mr Littleton?
Thank you. Look, my understanding is that that those 2 properties, 21 and 23, Robinson Road, have supported the closure and would need to support the extinguishing of that right of way prior to DPLH even contemplating a closure. So if they were to provide a different outcome, then it would not be closed. But that is not my understanding. They have provided written confirmation that they are comfortable that the right of way be closed adjacent to their property.
Councillor Caddy?
Yeah, thank you. That does help to clarify it for me because, look, this is unusual. There's not a lot of, I think, rights of way that are in private ownership. So I think we are dealing with a slightly unusual situation here. And given that the owners of the properties that abut it want it closed, given the state that it's clearly in, I don't really see a downside. I know one of the residents was concerned about this L-shaped right-of-way. I can testify that we've got a few L-shaped right-of-ways in Scarborough, and that I've never had a single complaint in the time I've been on council about any issues with it. I understand how some people can be, fear of the unknown and all that, but the evidence suggests that they work fine. So I am inclined to support this tonight for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Farrelly?
I'd probably have to have a different viewpoint to that because I lived in Doubleview and they were at one stage wanting to close all the rights away in Doubleview, and they were council or Crown land, I should say, and so the owners got the right to purchase. However, we can now see what's happened in Doubleview, and a lot of those, and I know they're not heritage areas, but no one foresaw what was going to happen in 30 years' time, and they have added to the density of that area. I'm quite sure that as time goes on, where density becomes people want to build with a bit of land, rights away will become one of those opportunities for people to live in a quieter street and also for them to have a bit of land if they have families. And we need to be aware of that, that not everyone wants to go high-rise, and they do want to be near established facilities and schools, etc. So I think that does need to be taken into consideration, and possibly purchasing the whole thing or keeping it in an opportunity to purchase for a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anyone else who'd like to debate this? If not, I'll go to Councillor Sargent to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually don't have much else to add from most of the questions around the room were asked and answered adequately. All I would be doing is repeating, so I will close debate, Mr. Mayor.
Perfect. Thank you. So we have got the motion on the table. Move Councillor Sargent, seconded Councillor Migdal, noting that if this is lost, Councillor Lagan has foreshadowed option 3. I'll put that to the vote, councillors. Thank you, councillors. And that, Lagan, have you voted? How many have we got? We've got 12 in the room? 13. Thank you. And that motion is carried 7-6. So for we have Councillors Boothman, Caddy, Migdal, Proud, Sargent, Thornton and myself, and against Councillor Farrelly, Ferranti, Lagan, Perkoff, Ree and Spagnolo, noting that Councillor Sandry has been out of the room. Right, councillors, we have been going for over 2 hours. With your indulgence, I will adjourn for a couple of minutes for a comfort break for yourselves and possibly myself. All right. While we've got most of you back, I think we can probably... Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. Perfect. Jack, could someone go maybe chase the other councillors? Is that all right? All right, councillors, we're back on live streaming. Councillors, we are just searching for the other two councillors to come back. So, councillors, we'll just continue. We've got a couple more that have already been pulled out, and then we'll deal with the one Councillor Farrelly has requested. So if we start with item 12.2 PRS4, which is a ground lease to Public Transport Authority of Western Australia over a portion of lot 2, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8 on deposited plan 26465, more commonly known as Hertha Road North. Hertha North Reserve, Stirling, sorry. On page 187, absolute majority vote is required on this one. Councillor Sargent as chair of that committee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will move the committee's recommendation to council.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Perkoff. Is there anyone opposed on that? No. If not, I will put that. So that is item 12.2 PRS 4. Okay. Thank you, councillors. And that is carried with councillors Boothman, Caddy, Farrelly, Lagan, Perkoff, Ree, Sargent, Spagnolo, Thornton, myself, 4. Councillor Ferrante is against that, and Councillor Migdale is out of the chamber, and so is Councillor Proud. That's still an absolute. Yep, that is carried. We're going to item 12.2 PRS 6, which is a car parking agreement with Woolworths Group Proprietary Limited on Grindelwood Drive, Balcatta. Councillor Sandry has a financial interest, so we'll ask her to leave the room. And Councillor Ferrante will also leave the room. Councillor Proud and Councillor Migdale have returned. It's like Parliament. It's exciting, isn't it? We need a whip. All right. Councillor Sargent as chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will move the committee's recommendation to council.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Spagnolo. Is anyone opposed? If not, I'll put that. Thank you, councillors, and that is unanimous. We can pause and ask the two councillors to come back in. Okay. Now that Councillor Sandry and Councillor Ferrante are in the room, Councillor Farrelly, you wanted to request another item be pulled out. So item
Yes, through the chair, yes.
Item 12.2 PRS2, is that the one?
That is correct.
All right. We've done some checking and I do have discretion to be able to change the order of business, so I'll use that discretion and allow you to remove that item. Council, however, can resolve to disagree with this ruling if you wish, otherwise you may. Sure that.
I object.
I think you're okay with this one, Councillor Farrelly. So we'll now go up to item 12.2 PRS2, terms of reference and appointment of the Strategic Property Advisory Group on page 160. You need to sit down though, Councillor. And Councillor Sargent as chair of the committee. You have the chair. Councillor Farrelly, sorry.
One of those ones I'm cringing about again, Mr Mayor. I will move the committee's recommendation.
Thank you. And is there a seconder for the committee's recommendation? Councillor Migdale, is there anyone opposed? Councillor Farrelly? Do you want to chair this, Councillor Perkoff, or are you right if I do it? Yeah. Councillor Caddy? Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This was quite an interesting one that came to committee. One of the issues with the Strategic Property Advisory Group was the idea behind this now, Mr Mayor, is to try and keep the group small. Whereas in the past, we've had what started out with a committee, which all councillors on it, and then moved over to a working group because the committee wasn't really working out. And one of the reasons why the committee system wasn't actually working out was we, as councillors, have very different views on what the city should do with its land, what the city should do with investments. And when we all meet as a group, I sometimes walk out of those meetings thinking, I don't think the officers are any of the wiser now than when they first went in there about what the direction of council actually is. So we've tried all councils on an actual strategic property committee, and that generally didn't work. We've tried all councillors on a working group, and that also generally didn't work. Mainly, what the officers are trying to see here is what they can bring to council that will possibly get through council. And by having a select group of people here, Mr. Mayor, it gives a taste of the opinion of council to the officers. Now, that doesn't preclude that any of the investments and strategic property around the City of Stirling won't still come back to our Community Resource Committee and subsequently council for councillors to actually debate. But it does give the officers a little bit of direction with a small group that perhaps they can bring to them and go, look, we're thinking of buying XYZ. What do you guys think about that? And they can give their opinions, and it's not actually wasting the officers' time if they progress something down the line a few months to committees and councils and we end up saying no to it, which is what has happened in the past. Now, the reason I actually cringe a little bit was at committee, every councillor wanted to be back on this property committee again. And there were several ideas. Perhaps we break it into wards, just let councillors decide if they want to be on the committee. But that's leading it back to the issues we had in the past. When you stack up this working group with too many councillors, the officers are generally going to leave those meetings going, well, I still haven't got too much direction. So what I will ask, Mr. Mayor, if it does get a bit messy or some councillors do want to stick their hand up to be an additional F and G and so on after the 5 councillors are on the board here, Mr. Mayor, we go to a ballot and allow that the 5 most voted councillors to be on this, and we maximise this as a 5-councillor working group. I'll leave with that, Mr. Mayor.
Let's see how we go. Councillor Mcdale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel that this is an excellent way to go. I think that we have so far over the last perhaps year missed out on opportunities because of the format of our committee. We need to progress and work in a more agile way to arrive at the most timely considered results. However, it is not without concern for the fact that we do not have all wards represented here. To me, I do feel that we should have representation from every ward in the city. However, the fact that whatever this group arrives at will then be progressed to CNR committee and then through to council is okay by me, but I concur with the mover that we should certainly consider, should anybody else like to represent their ward and put their hand up, they should then be included in this working group. But I definitely support this move. Thank you.
All right. So, well, either way, you two moved and seconded this one. So let's go to Councillor Farrelly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and through you as the chair. I listened to Miss Councillor Sargent talking about the committee system has not been working out. We need something new. There's been a lack of compromise, that there doesn't seem to be real direction given to the city officers in which they can undertake further research in a direction which the council will then act on quickly, and it will all be passed and everything will be sweet. As a new councillor, I'm now in a year nearly into the role, as other fellow councillors who were elected at the same time I was last year. And we have, and I don't disagree, we have possibly not been as able to participate in council decision making on external committees, and this is an opportunity in which we can become far more cognizant of what is part of the decision making process of the city's property and investments. I do believe that you should have an opportunity given to all councillors, and I don't think the ballot's going to necessarily do so, to have real accountability and transparency. The ballot will be based on who is expected, as previously. Now we've got something in front of us, which is the members of the Tamala Park group, and there's a presumption there that the knowledge, because it's a property group, is going to be the ones that will have the most understanding of property. That might be a commendable decision if you're looking at people who have come from nowhere, but I believe that there's a number of us who may also have an interest in property and investments, and particularly what is the rationale for what is occurring in the city for which we now represent our communities. Therefore, we seem to, when you know people, you tend to be more comfortable with them and their opinions, but I think we should be open up to all councillors now. You have got to know a few more of us. However, it is a bit of a risk, I understand. You actually have to put trust in our opinion. However, I don't think you need to go to a ballot. What I'm going to say, thank you, I'll close with saying is that, if I can find where I wrote it.
Sorry, I'll just stop you though. Before you do close, once you finish that, if you want to foreshadow another motion, you should do it then.
Oh, do I do it? Can I do that now?
Do it before you close.
All right, well, I am going to foreshadow. I don't believe that we actually need another committee. I think there's a really good attendance at the CRC from those like myself who are not voting members, and I'd like to foreshadow that the CRC be the default group that answers these, that is, assesses these things that are placed before it in terms of property and finance of property, and that you abolish the other committees that have come before it and use the CRC as the group in which the discussions are held. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. And that intent is clear, that you don't support this and you want it to default to the CRC.
Yeah.
Yep. Councillor Lagan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I spoke at length at committee on this, and probably the key point that I made at committee was that a working group has no statutory authority, doesn't carry voting power, so it has to go to the committee. Just a question through you to officers. Were we to adopt 1 and 2 here with A, B, C, D, E, what would stop, let's say I wasn't one of the A, B, C, D, E members listed on there, what would stop me, or could I be stopped from attending the meetings anyway as an elected member?
No, I wouldn't think you could. No, so the answer is no. So there's nothing stopping someone else.
So for me, point 2 basically should be anyone who wants to attend as an elected member. I don't really see the need to necessarily list, as you were suggesting, people who are on TPRC, although, one might argue that they deal on a more regular basis with the current market processes for property sales. But, I did speak at length. My belief is that all elected members were elected by their community to represent their community on all council matters, and that therefore nobody should be excluded in any way, shape or form from working groups or from speaking at committee and attending committee or council. And we know that is the case. These don't have a lot of teeth. This is just a discussion group, essentially. Look, I'm going to disagree with some of the debate that's been had, especially at the start of this, about how it didn't work in the past. I would argue it did work in the past. We had things brought to us that the council wasn't happy with. And as this has become more mature and more nuanced, the elected members that have sat in or debated issues with relation to council and issues with relation to investments and the income on investments have become more savvy with what the officers are trying to do. What the officers are trying to do is present to us opportunities to purchase or generate items that will give us income. What's interesting though is that on one end of the ledger we're very good at spending on things that we say need to be spent on, and I'm not going to divulge in an open forum what those items are, but they're big expense. And then on the other end of the ledger we're talking about, let's look at 7% or 8% on a property that might be purchased for substantial sums of money that, isn't going to cover where we're spending elsewhere. I'm passionate enough about property, having worked many years ago on property and having a personal interest in property. I agree with what the officers are trying to do, but as I said at committee, all elected members should be able to be part of this. Putting it to a ballot just closes it down, and then the answer to the question was you could still attend anyway, so what's the ballot doing? You either have this and have the talk forum, which then goes to committee, or you don't have it at all. I think Councillor Farrelly's suggesting that, and it goes straight to committee and can have the same debate anyway. I think the intent of the motion from the officers was to give us an opportunity to flesh out what was presented to us in a way that maybe allowed us to come to a decision before we went to committee and not have a convoluted debate from committee to council. So I'm happy enough with that as it is, but under debate, especially from last Tuesday and even tonight, it appears to me that maybe the right process would be just have this go to committee and deal with it there, and that anybody can attend, or the right process is we have this and everyone's attending. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sandri. I do have Spagnolo and Boothman after that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I obviously am not a voting member at committee, and I did make some comments there. So I didn't actually formally agree to my name being up there. And if the mover and seconder would agree, the removal of my name and the replacement with Councillor Farrelly.
Mover and seconder, do you agree with that?
Happy to agree with that.
Seconder, Councillor Migdale, happy with that? Yep. At committee?
Yes.
Yep. Happy with that. Councillors, you finished? Councillor Spagnolo?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, look, I'm not really sure what the fuss is all about tonight. I mean, this is essentially a subcommittee that's being formed to discuss property matters.
Yeah, just to be clear though, it's not even a subcommittee.
Well,
it's
like
just
a subcommittee.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's essentially a subcommittee, advisory committee, and the whole idea is to bone things out. Then when it goes to a committee, or whether it goes to the council, ultimately it's the council that makes the decision. Now, initially when this was all set up, there was a situation where all councillors were involved. Now it's been reduced to this, and Councillor Lagan is absolutely correct. We are all councillors of the City of Stirling, and we can attend all meetings that are duly constituted. So from my point of view, as I say, I cannot see what the fuss is about. I'm so pleased to see that Councillor Farrelly has been nominated. I sensed that she was interested, and also for the interest of the council, I understand that Councillor Farrelly does have certain qualifications which would probably assist that committee. So can I say that if there are other councillors that are interested, it doesn't matter whether it's 5, 6, 10 or whatever, at the end of the day, whatever happens, the council will make the decision. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Spagnolo. Councillor Boothman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, this is a proposed strategic property advisory group, and it is exactly that, to basically look at acquisition or disposal of properties and make recommendations back to council. On that basis, it's going to be able to consider matters that otherwise, we hadn't be going closed doors at council and determining factors. And by the time you've got 15 different opinions on matters, can drag things right out. I actually support this item. I think by having a limited number of people who can actually vote at the group will help to expedite getting matters brought forward through the CRC and through the council, which has the final say. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't stop any councillors at council debating an item. And in the meantime, though, it gives the property group, as I say, an ability to deal with matters which maybe we shouldn't discuss too widely in open forum until we've got some particular things on. But you've got a terms of reference, and I just think that let's get on with it.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any other councillor who wants to indicate? Can I just provide a quick bit of clarification too? I think the intent of this committee, again, wasn't even to look at each property. It really was just to be a bit of a sounding board with professional, my understanding, having professional advice come on board as well from external, and to liaise with the rest of council and provide that framework to operate in. So quite often those groups, the properties that would be looked at would still come at probably first instance, quite often to the Community and Resource Committee, not to this group. If there's no other indication, I will go back to Councillor Sargent to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I think you put it quite eloquently. This group is a sounding. Want to set up an investment property that gives the city investment and income. And just on the back of something Councillor Lagan was talking about, every single time the officers have come to this council and said, here's a proposal, it'll get you X amount, 7%, 10%, whatever it is, this council generally rejects it. For a number of reasons, and a lot of them are very valid. But if we can have a group here that is the sounding board, that the officers can go to this group and say, hey, we got this particular investment, what do you guys think? They can actually be that representative of council. They can actually tell the officers, yes, we think this is a great idea, or no, there's some red flags on this one. And that in itself is going to propel anything that the officers give to the Community Resource Committee already leg up, and they haven't actually wasted their time. Because that's essentially what the point of all this is. What direction do we give the officers of the City of Stirling, and what should they be investing their time in? Because in the past, they've invested their time greatly in a whole lot of projects, a whole lot of investments that this council ultimately, after months of their work, says no to. So this is a bit of a leg up, bit of a sounding board by council. I'm using that word quite a bit, Mr. Mayor. It was a good word. A bit of a sounding board by councillors, so they not actually end up wasting their time. If an investment comes up, they can go to this particular advisory group, and the advisory group can say, no, don't waste your time on this one, or yes, we think that's going to be a good way forward. And I think that's actually quite prudent, and it could actually speed up some of the things in the strategic property portfolio. So I'll end with that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. And with that, that does close debate. So we've got a motion moved Councillor Sargent, seconded Councillor Migdale. The intent is clear. There's 5 initial members. No councillor is precluded if they wish to attend. And there is a foreshadowed motion by Councillor Farrelly that if this motion is lost, then it would just default to the Community and Resource Committee. So I'll put that motion. Yeah, as it stands there, yes. Okay, councillors, we've got Councillor Sandry to vote, and that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. That does bring us to the balance of reports. Councillor Sargent would like to move the balance of reports of the Community and Resources Committee.
I don't think there's too many left on this piece of paper, Mr. Mayor, but happy to move the balance of reports.
Couple there. Councillor Proud has seconded. We'll go to the vote, please, councillors. That is unanimous. Please be advised that the remainder of the Community and Resources Committee recommendations have been adopted by exception resolution. Councillors will now move on to direct to council reports. Item 13, reports for consideration in accordance with section 4.24 of the Meeting Procedures Local Law 2009. I have nil. Item 14, motions of which previous notice has been given. Item 14.1, a notice of motion from Councillor Suzanne Migdale. Beach Access Manning, 238. Councillor Migdale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the alt rec on page 242, please.
Thank you, councillor. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Ferrante. Is there anyone opposed? Councillor Farrelly, you're opposed? Yep. So you're opposed to the motion? Yep. At the moment, councillor. So it's a suggested alt rec. Have you got a question to clarify something? We can. Let's just clarify. Yeah, fine. Yeah. So there's no one opposed. So we'll put that to the vote. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Takes us to item 14.2, notice of motion, Councillor Elizabeth Ree, artificial reef at Brighton Beach. Councillor Ree.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to endorse the alternative recommendation on page 249 that the establishment of an artificial reef at Brighton Beach or another part of the City of Stirling coastline is considered as part of the wider coastal hazard risk management and adaptation planning process being undertaken over the next 2 years, please.
Councillor Caddy has seconded. Is there anyone opposed to this one? If not, I will put that motion. I've got one to go. Councillor Proud. Councillor Proud. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Item 15, notice of motion for consideration at the next meeting. Councillors, would you like to submit any notice of motions for consideration at the next meeting? Councillor Migdale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Is it on the board? Yes.
Yep. Go.
That the Mayor writes to the Minister for Planning asking that the state government, A, explains the master planning process for the Whopper ECU site in Mount Lawley, B, confirms if a committee will be formed, and if so, what the terms of reference will be, and whether the city will be represented, and C, confirms whether there is potential for the Whopper building to be gifted to the city as a performing arts centre/theatre. The reason?
Yes.
Both residents and council of the City of Stirling only heard about this move through a press release a few weeks ago, with neither being consulted on this matter. The city recognises that Whopper and ECU add significant value to the fabric of the community and seek to ensure that the community is included in the conversation to achieve the best outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Migdale. Councillor Farrelly, you indicated.
Yes, I've got a couple of notifications.
Thank you. Yep, and just your microphone and then your first one.
Microphone on, sorry.
Sure.
Through you, Mr Chair. The first one is that a quarterly progress report is provided to elected members with regards to the normalisation of the Scarborough redevelopment area. And the reason for this is that normalisation of the Scarborough redevelopment area is of strategic importance to the council, and this will ensure a regular report on progress against agreed timelines is provided to elected members.
Thank you. And if you can just provide that to governance after.
Okay, I'll
we
email
finish.
it through. Okay.
Yep.
The other one is that you, as the Mayor, write to the Minister of Planning requesting an update on meetings held and progress of the high-level transport working group. The reason for this is in early 2018, the City was invited to be part of this high-level working group, including several key government agencies, to develop a framework to guide future assessment solutions for traffic and transport issues in Scarborough. With development continuing and no apparent solution or framework evident, it is essential that the workings of this group, including its progress, be made public.
Thank you, Councillor. So if you can send both of those through to governance so I have them on record. Are there any other notice of motion, councillors? No. If not, I will go to item 16, which is questions by members of which due notice has been given. And item 16.1, questions on notice, Councillor Elizabeth Ree. Is it just a question?
It's just a slight question on page 252. We've got the Trig Bushland, which has got Bush Forever Site 308. It's got St Mary's School, Military Reserve club rooms. Why didn't it have Surf WA room on that as well?
Mr. Littleton?
Yeah, look, thank you. We did send out some confirmation as to the area bounded by Bush Forever Site 309. It doesn't include the current Surfing WA building, nor the Trig, the Island Market, the cafe kiosk that is Kalis, or the Trig Surf Lifesaving Club. So that is, I haven't got the details. My computer stopped, but I think Reserve 12922. Some of it is contained within the Bush Forever site, but not all of it.
There you go. Item 17 is new business of an urgent nature. We have nil. Item 18, matters behind closed doors. We don't need. because we did that before. So it takes us to item 19, which is closure, and I now declare the meeting closed at 9:49 p.m. Thank you, councillors.